Hey guys, tonight we wander somewhere quiet, through dusty corridors of time where ancient footsteps echo softly and the air smells faintly of stone, candle smoke, and something faintly animal. You're here for something gentle, something weirdly comforting, the secret lives of pets in the ancient world. And yes, you probably won't survive this, not from fear, but from sheer drowsy fascination. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I always imagine these stories drifting across time zones like tiny lights, one listener nodding off in Delhi, another in Sao Paulo, someone else letting the night hum in Berlin. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of an ancient world, not a specific one, but a hazy blend of them all. A timeless bazaar of human history, where stone temples hum faintly with prayers, and every civilization you've ever read about seems to overlap. Somewhere, a torch flickers beside a marble statue. Somewhere else, the Nile glimmers like molten glass. And through it all, there's movement, the soft scurry, flutter, and pad of paws. The story of pets is really the story of us. Long before humans built empires or wrote poetry, they were watching animals, not just for food or fear, but fascination. A wolf that lingered too close to a campfire, a bird that mimicked laughter, a cat that slinked in from the shadows, too curious to be wild and too proud to be tamed. You don't see it yet, but this is where the first friendship began. You wander closer. The campfire is warm, the smell of charred wood heavy in the air. A family sleeps, but beside them, a small, shaggy creature keeps watch. The wolf-dog hybrid's ears twitch. It looks at the horizon, then back at the humans. That glance, that quiet recognition, might be one of history's most beautiful accidents. From that simple bond, 1,000 years of companionship were born. Civilization sharpened, cities grew, and people started collecting animals not just to work or protect, but to connect. And that's where things got strange. You'd think cats and dogs were the default, universal, eternal, but ancient people had an imagination that could make your local pet store look shockingly boring. You drift through Mesopotamia now, the cradle of civilization. Between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, farmers whisper to goats, and palace priests raise doves in tall cages. Some believe that spirits live inside these animals, protectors of crops and children. Archaeologists once found small clay tablets with sketches of monkeys, lions, and birds, all marked with careful Sumerian cuneiform. Pets, but also omens. Scholars still argue, as they always do, whether these animals were truly domestic or just symbolic companions. Either way, you can almost hear the faint chatter of monkeys perched on ziggurat walls, staring down at priests mid-prayer, tail swishing in divine boredom. The air thickens, shifts. You feel yourself gliding across centuries to Egypt. The sun blazes gold over limestone, and every shadow seems alive. This is where pet keeping becomes something sacred, obsessive even. Egyptians didn't just adore cats, they elevated them to godhood. You walk past a courtyard where a noblewoman sits with a cat curled at her feet, its eyes glinting like green jewels. Nearby, a small boy coaxes a mongoose from a woven basket. Baboons chatter on rooftops. Ibises strut in temple courtyards. And down by the riverbank, a crocodile basks lazily, probably belonging to a priest who swears it brings good fortune. But that's the thing, pet wasn't the same word back then. These animals weren't just company, they were bridges to the divine, miniature gods in fur and feather. When one died, it wasn't tossed away or forgotten. It was wrapped carefully in linen, anointed with oils, and sent into the afterlife. People mourned them the way you'd mourn a dear friend. You can almost smell the incense from the embalmer's workshop, honey and resin, faintly sweet, faintly sad. Someone is whispering a prayer. The body on the table is small, a cat, its face peaceful. Around it, tiny amulets of Bastet gleam in candlelight. You wonder, as your heart slows to the rhythm of the room, if this was the moment when humans began to realize how much love could hurt. Further north, in a place the Egyptians would one day call the lands of the barbarians, another kind of pet culture was emerging. Rome, though it hasn't quite become the empire yet, hums in the distance. You can hear the clatter of sandals, the barking of dogs. Roman homes, especially the wealthy ones, would later teem with creatures. Parrots that could greet guests, lapdogs with names engraved on marble, and even monkeys dressed in tunics for entertainment. Some emperors preferred lions and tigers, but others, oddly enough, doted on pigeons and peacocks. One legend tells of a Roman matron who kept a flock of sacred geese that once saved the city by honking when intruders approached. The birds were honored like soldiers afterward. That's right, geese. Imagine having your town saved by what's essentially an ancient security alarm with feathers. But they took it seriously. They built temples for them. They gave them feasts. And then there were the eccentric ones, people who blurred the line between affection and obsession. Emperor Elagabalus, for instance, supposedly released snakes into banquets just to watch guests panic. Nero, on the other hand, kept a pet tiger that followed him through palace corridors. Scholars still argue whether these stories were real or just political gossip. Either way, you sense that owning something wild was a symbol of power, a way of saying, I control nature itself. But it wasn't always about dominance. In smaller Roman homes, you find tenderness. A mosaic floor somewhere in Pompeii still bears the words, Cave Canem, beware the dog. But the dog it depicts looks oddly friendly, almost proud. Maybe that was the point. A warning, sure, but also a message of loyalty. The idea that this creature, this small beating heart, belonged here, with you. As you drift between these worlds, the warmth of Egypt, the grandeur of Rome, the murmuring streets of Babylon, you begin to see the same pattern. Humans needed animals not for survival anymore, but for stillness, a shared heartbeat in a noisy world. You pause near a fountain where a Roman boy tosses crumbs to a turtle. His mother watches, smiling faintly. It's such a small thing, but somehow it's everything, this quiet exchange between species. You can almost feel how ancient love must have sounded. Soft, patient, without words. Maybe that's what binds us across thousands of years, the same need to reach beyond ourselves, to find trust in a creature that doesn't speak our language, but somehow understands it. You breathe out, long and slow. The past fades into twilight. The stars look the same as they always did. Somewhere, a dog sighs in its sleep. You've only just begun the journey, and already the ancient world feels oddly familiar, a sleepy echo of everything we still do today.
You drift forward into Egypt's golden haze, where the sun never quite sets and the air shimmers like silk stretched over eternity. You can almost hear the rhythmic splash of oars on the Nile, smell the sweetness of lotus blooms, and feel the dust cling gently to your sandals. You've stepped into a world where animals are not just companions, they're citizens, co-workers, divine messengers, and sometimes gods in disguise. You probably expected cats. Everyone does. The sleek, self-satisfied feline lounging in hieroglyphs, tail curled like a question mark, eyes half closed with royal indifference. But what no one tells you is that ancient Egyptians didn't just stop at cats. Their idea of domesticated stretched far beyond the modern imagination, into temples, deserts, and sacred ponds where creatures both beautiful and bizarre shared daily life with humans. You start with the cats anyway, because you can't not. Bastet, the cat goddess, sleek, poised, sometimes depicted with a lion's head, sometimes a house cat's. Egyptians believed cats carried a fragment of her spirit. They weren't pets, they were divine roommates. If your cat wandered into a neighbor's home, you didn't call it theft, it was a visitation. If someone harmed a cat, it wasn't a crime, it was blasphemy. There are written accounts of people mourning their cats by shaving their eyebrows, as if grief itself lived on the face. Imagine that, a city full of people, eyebrows gone, silently grieving their feline gods. But then you notice something stranger. Over by the temple of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, priests care for dozens of long-beaked birds. Each bird is given food, shelter, and attention like a scholar's apprentice. When one dies, it's carefully mummified, wrapped in linen, and placed in neat rows inside catacombs beneath the city. Archaeologists have found thousands, yes, thousands of mummified ibises stacked like scrolls. Scholars still argue whether they were truly pets or sacred offerings, but one thing's certain, someone loved them enough to give them a second life. As you walk further, a small crowd catches your eye. Children giggle and toss dates to a baboon sitting cross-legged on a polished stone. His fur is golden under the sunlight, and he's wearing, you swear, a tiny beaded collar. The baboon is sacred to Thoth, too, but also strangely domestic. Egyptians trained baboons to pick fruit, pour wine, even play small instruments during ceremonies. Somewhere between reverence and companionship, the lines blurred. This wasn't a circus act. It was ritual, affection wrapped in religion. Nearby, an old woman sits by the riverbank feeding a crocodile. It blinks slowly, half submerged, eyes glinting like emerald glass. This, you realize, must be one of Sobek's pets, the crocodile god of strength and fertility. Some temples maintained live crocodiles in sacred pools, adorning them with gold and jewels. There's even record of one being fed honey cakes and wine, because apparently even crocodiles enjoy a little luxury. You watch as the old woman tosses the last piece of bread into the water and whispers a prayer. The crocodile drifts away, disappearing beneath the surface like a shadow slipping into another world. It's surreal how ordinary it all feels here. People, animals, gods, all sharing the same space, the same breath. You realize that to ancient Egyptians, owning a pet wasn't an act of control, it was an act of harmony. Humans didn't rule over animals, they coexisted with them, worshipped them, mirrored them. You step into a marketplace now, bustling and fragrant. Merchants shout over each other, selling grain, fish, and exotic creatures. A boy tugs at your sleeve, holding out a basket covered with linen. Inside, two tiny green monkeys blink up at you, faces curious and tired. "Good luck," the boy says, voice full of rehearsed confidence. You wonder how many lucky monkeys survived their voyage from Nubia or beyond. The ancient pet trade, it seems, was already alive and thriving, a mix of fascination and exploitation that feels uncomfortably familiar. A few stalls down, someone sells trained cats to temple caretakers, claiming each has divine instincts. Another merchant displays parrots, their feathers painted in unnaturally bright colors. You hear whispers of gazelles raised by nobles, of falcons perched on palace balconies, of sacred bulls worshipped for their perfection. The Egyptians blurred the line between pet and deity so completely that sometimes even they couldn't tell where affection ended and worship began. You walk towards a quiet alley behind the market and stumble upon a small home, simple, sun-baked, with a woven mat for a door. Inside, a family sits cross-legged, eating lentils and bread. A small cat weaves between their legs, brushing its tail against the children. It's not jeweled or divine here, just loved. The father laughs softly as the cat bats at his fingers. The mother hums a tune. For all the grandeur of temples and rituals, this is the heart of it. Compassionship in its simplest, sleepiest form. Outside again, the day cools towards evening. You follow the sound of chanting towards a temple courtyard. A procession passes. Priests carrying small animal statues, followed by mourners holding tiny wrapped bundles. You realize what they are: mummified pets. Cats, ibises, dogs, even fish. Offerings for the afterlife. Somewhere deep in the desert, there are entire necropolises filled with these beloved creatures. Tiny sarcophagi stacked in chambers lit only by oil lamps. You pause before one of those dark tunnels now, half imagined, half real. The air is cool and still. Walls shimmer faintly with hieroglyphs. Prayers for safe passage, not for kings, but for cats and birds. You imagine a child whispering goodbye to a pet before it's laid to rest here. The same kind of whispered goodbye that still happens today, in quiet homes and veterinary clinics, thousands of years later. It's peaceful here. A little eerie, yes, but soft, like time itself slowed down to watch. Then, a flutter of wings. You look up. A falcon perches high on a pillar, watching you. Its eyes are sharp, unblinking, the air around it heavy with significance. This, you know, is Horus's bird, the living symbol of the sky. The falcon tilts its head, as if assessing you, then takes off, slicing through the dusk. You follow it out of the temple grounds, back towards the wide, endless river. The Nile reflects the dying sun, molten gold fading to indigo. Fishermen pull in nets. Children chase ducks along the shore. A cat leaps from a reed boat onto the dock, landing gracefully, like it's done this 1,000 times. The rhythm of life here feels circular. Humans, animals, gods, all woven together in one great hush. Scholars still argue whether Egyptians were the first to domesticate cats, or if that credit goes to earlier desert dwellers. But standing here, watching the last light fade, you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is the tenderness that survived, that sense of quiet guardianship between species. You stretch, feeling the warmth leave your skin, and take one last look at the horizon. The world of ancient Egypt begins to dissolve, the edges fading like watercolor in sleep. Somewhere behind you, the whisper of a purr lingers in the sand. You're still at the beginning of this strange, gentle expedition, but already the ancient world feels a little less foreign and a lot more human.
You leave Egypt slowly, like waking from a long, golden dream. The world around you cools, the air thickens, and the sound of rushing water turns from the calm lap of the Nile to the proud, echoing splash of fountains. You find yourself in Rome, loud, extravagant, and just a little ridiculous. The kind of place where everything, even pets, had to be bigger, bolder, and more theatrical. Marble columns rise around you. The streets are alive with chatter. Merchants arguing, senators passing in togas, children darting between stalls, and always, always the distant barking of dogs. Rome loved its animals almost as much as it loved its drama. And in true Roman fashion, affection was often tangled with ego. Here, pets weren't just companions, they were declarations of identity, trophies of conquest, living symbols of wealth and power. You start in a villa, one of those sprawling estates outside the city where the wealthy retreated to escape the noise. The air smells of rosemary and warm stone. Inside the shaded courtyard, a woman in flowing white reclines on a couch. At her feet lies a small dog, its fur sleek and gleaming. It's no ordinary mutt. This is a Maltese, a breed the Romans adored. Tiny, elegant, pampered to the point of absurdity. The woman leans down and feeds the dog a piece of honey cake, murmuring something soft. There's no laughter here, just tenderness.
You can see it, that same eternal bond, the quiet presence of something alive and loyal beside you. But then a servant enters, carrying a bronze bowl of scented oil to bathe the dog. The animal protests, yipping, and the woman sighs indulgently. You can't help but smile. Even 2,000 years ago, people still argued with their pets about bath time. You step outside again, into a bustling street. Rome at its height is a spectacle, and that includes its animals. Exotic creatures from across the empire arrived daily. Elephants from Africa, parrots from India, peacocks from Persia. A man walks past leading a chained leopard. Yes, a leopard, its fur rippling in the light. People stare, whisper, laugh nervously. The man grins. This, you realize, is status incarnate. Having a rare animal in Rome was like driving a sports car down a narrow, ancient street. Flashy, impractical, but guaranteed attention. Of course, some Romans took it further. Emperor Augustus reportedly kept a menagerie in his gardens, not for battle, but beauty. His ponds shimmered with imported fish. His courtyards echoed with birdsong from every continent he could reach. Later emperors grew more eccentric. One story claims Nero had peacocks dyed different colors just to match his mosaics. Another says he fed his pet snake from a silver dish. But perhaps the most infamous animal lover of them all was Emperor Elagabalus, the same chaotic ruler who, rumor it has it, released snakes during dinner parties to watch his guests scatter in panic. Scholars still argue whether that tale was exaggerated by historians trying to paint him as insane, but it fits the pattern. For the Romans, power meant spectacle. Even their affection came with theater. You wander further and find yourself in the Colosseum. It's empty now, silent except for the faint rustle of dust. You imagine what it must have been like when it was full. The roar of the crowd, the clash of metal, the growl of lions dragged from faraway deserts. Those animals weren't pets, but they tell another truth about Rome. Fascination with beasts ran deep, mingled with both reverence and cruelty. Still, outside those arenas, there was warmth. You follow the trail of a small boy running through an alley, a puppy chasing his sandals. He's laughing, calling out its name, Felix, Lucky. In a city that could be so brutal, this moment feels fragile, almost holy. The dog finally catches up, tail wagging furiously, and the boy kneels to hug it. The puppy licks his cheek, and you realize that not even empire or conquest can dull something that simple: joy in another living being. You drift past homes, noticing something curious. Many have mosaics embedded in their thresholds, each with the same phrase, Cave canem, beware of the dog. You've seen pictures of these, but in person, they're strange. Some show fierce dogs snarling mid-lunge. Others show sleepy hounds lying down, almost smiling. Maybe it wasn't always a warning. Maybe it was pride, a little artistic bragging about a beloved guard dog. A woman sweeps her doorstep nearby. She tells you, in Latin, though somehow you understand, that dogs keep bad spirits away, not just thieves. They hear what we can't, she says. And you remember the Egyptian temples, the animals that guarded against the unseen. Maybe that belief never really died, just changed languages. You keep walking, and the city softens as night falls. Lanterns flicker, music spills from taverns. You stop by a small marble fountain where two lovers sit, feeding crumbs to a bird perched between them. It's a nightingale, or something close to it, singing faintly as the water ripples below. The couple smiles, their laughter low and sleepy. You realize that birds held a special place in Roman hearts. Wealthy households often had entire rooms for them, aviaria, ornate cages made of silver and ivory, filled with colorful species brought from foreign lands. Some could even mimic words. Imagine that, dinner conversation with a parrot that quotes your guests back at them. But for every grand aviary, there was also a humble cage hanging by a window in a poor family's home. A single bird, kept for its song. Something small and bright to break the monotony of survival.
You peek into one now, a stone room barely the size of a closet. A man snores softly beside a clay oil lamp. In the corner, a tiny cage hangs, and inside, a bird sleeps too, head tucked under its wing. You notice the parallel, the contrast between palace pets and alley pets, between exotic tigers and singing sparrows. And somehow, both versions feel deeply human. A historian once wrote that the Romans were the first to treat animals as individuals rather than symbols. They gave them names, buried them with epitaphs, even built small tombs for them. You pass one of these now, a little marble slab half buried in weeds. The inscription reads, "To my dearest Glycon, who never left my side." The carving beneath shows a dog curled up, asleep forever. You trace your fingers over the name. 2,000 years gone, and still the emotion hums like something alive. You linger a while longer, listening to the wind slide through the ruins. Somewhere distant, a flute plays. You think of how strange it is that the same empire that built arenas of death also carved love letters for dogs. That's Rome. Contradictions piled like layers of marble and dust. As you begin to walk again, the city flickers. The grand streets blur into countryside paths. You catch glimpses: a shepherd playing with his dog, a farmer's child riding a goat, a merchant feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons before a voyage. Small moments, fleeting, ordinary, the kind that never make it into scrolls or history books. Because for all their excess, Romans understood something simple: the comfort of a heartbeat that isn't yours, the soft weight of trust resting against your knee. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent of olive oil and smoke. The hum of the city fades, replaced by the distant crash of waves. Rome begins to dissolve into mist, its marble villas fading to white. Somewhere behind you, the laughter of a child and the bark of a dog echo one last time, before both slip into silence. The next world is waiting. Different continent, different rhythm, but the same eternal companionship hiding quietly inside it.
As we continue our quiet stroll through history's menagerie, the line between pet, protector, and spiritual symbol begins to blur even further. In ancient times, companionship wasn't just about affection or amusement, it was often about meaning. To own an animal was to hold a fragment of divine essence, a whisper of the cosmos resting by your side. Take ancient Egypt once again, for instance. While cats remain the most celebrated, many nobles also kept ibises, those elegant, long-beaked birds often associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom. To have one in your household was like keeping a living emblem of intellect and learning. These creatures were not fed scraps, but ritual meals, often given polished stones or symbolic offerings, tokens of divine respect. The ibis would glide around courtyards, their presence seen as auspicious, their every movement a reminder that the gods were watching with serene approval. And then there were baboons. Yes, baboons, beloved for their mischievous energy. The Egyptians admired them as symbols of the morning sun, connected to Thoth as well. Some temples kept entire groups of them, trained to mimic gestures of prayer at dawn. Imagine the tranquil rhythm of temple bells in the distance and a row of baboons raising their arms toward the rising sun. Strange, yet profoundly poetic. For the ancient mind, that wasn't a spectacle, it was devotion in motion. Further east, in ancient Persia, nobility had a rather distinctive preference for falcons and cheetahs. These were not merely pets, they were prestige itself. The art of falconry, now associated with the medieval world, actually found some of its earliest expressions here. A trained falcon was a partner in both sport and survival, capable of hunting prey with deadly grace. But owning one wasn't easy. It required patience, silence, and understanding, much like meditation. Persian nobles would spend hours bonding with their birds, feeding them gently, adjusting their hoods, whispering to them in tones softer than the wind. The cheetah, meanwhile, represented something more: speed, focus, and divine control over chaos. They were transported on litters, treated with oils, even given jewelry. A cheetah at one's side was not a wild beast, It was a statement: I have tamed nature's fastest heart. If you close your eyes and picture it, a soft desert breeze, a noble's tent shimmering with golden embroidery, and beside him a cheetah, calm, eyes half closed, it feels almost serene. The wild, pacified not through dominance but through harmony. In the ancient Chinese courts, the picture was even more diverse. From tiny crickets kept in ornate cages, whose nightly songs soothed emperors, to miniature lapdogs bred for warmth and affection, pet-keeping in China had deep symbolic layers. The cricket especially was a symbol of endurance and rebirth. People believed that its chirp carried the voice of nature itself. Listening to one was a meditative act. Entire families would pass down favorite cricket cages as heirlooms, carved from jade or bamboo, polished over generations. Then there were goldfish, first domesticated not for food but for beauty and tranquility. The gentle swish of their tails in water bowls represented balance and peace. Early Chinese gardens often featured shallow pools filled with goldfish and lotus flowers, a living artwork of serenity. It's no wonder the goldfish became a symbol of prosperity and calm. Even the emperors found solace in animals. Records from the Han Dynasty mention emperors keeping miniature deer, songbirds, and even trained bears, yes, bears, that performed gentle dances during ceremonial banquets. These weren't acts of cruelty, but gestures of controlled spectacle. Animals were believed to harmonize the energies of the imperial palace, balancing yin and yang, motion and stillness. Traveling westward again, we find the Greeks and Romans. They too had their share of unusual companions. In Roman villas, monkeys were prized as entertainers. Parrots were taught to mimic greetings for guests, and peacocks strut through courtyards as living jewels. The wealthy even imported exotic animals, tigers, leopards, and crocodiles, not only for the arena but occasionally as private curiosity. Yet not all Roman pets were extravagant. Many households kept dormice, tiny, round rodents, raised in clay jars called gliraria. These were both pets and delicacies, depending on one's appetite. Some owners kept them purely for amusement, feeding them nuts and honey, letting them run about the home. For others, they symbolized good fortune. The line between affection and appetite was thin, but the fascination remained. Philosophers too kept animals. The great Pliny the Elder wrote about pet eels, dogs, and even ravens trained to speak. To the Romans, animals embodied the virtues or vices of men. A loyal dog was an emblem of faithfulness. A caged bird, the fragility of freedom. In quiet Roman gardens, surrounded by fountains and marble, you might find a philosopher sitting beside a cage, listening to a bird's gentle call, lost in thought about the nature of life itself. Meanwhile, in ancient India, the relationship between humans and animals was deeply spiritual. The concept of ahimsa, non-violence toward all living beings, meant that pets weren't owned as property, but regarded as fellow travelers in the cycle of life. Monks and nobles alike kept peacocks, parrots, and monkeys, not merely for beauty, but as sacred reflections of creation's diversity. Peacocks were especially revered. Their feathers symbolized immortality and wisdom, associated with deities like Saraswati and Kartikeya. To see a peacock strutting across palace grounds was to witness divine grace in motion. Parrots, on the other hand, were beloved for their speech. Kings trained them to recite poetry and messages, while storytellers considered them vessels of divine tales. A gentle story from the Jataka tales speaks of a prince who raised a wounded parrot. When healed, the bird refused to fly away, saying, "Love is the strongest cage." Whether true or not, the sentiment captures the Indian essence of pet keeping. Love, not ownership, was the bond. And then there were the oddities, pets that defy all expectation. Ancient records mention Mesopotamian nobles keeping gazelles that roamed freely through palace courtyards. The Assyrians bred lions not only for hunting, but for companionship to their kings. In some Egyptian tombs, archaeologists discovered pet beetles, scarabs, carefully buried beside their owners, believed to guide the soul through the afterlife. Even stranger that, ancient Japanese folklore speaks of koi carp that lived for centuries, becoming spiritual companions passed down through generations. Their steady swimming was said to calm the mind, teaching patience through motion. To watch them was to meditate on time itself.
It's humbling, isn't it? To realize that across so many lands and centuries, people found comfort in the company of animals, creatures they believed could bridge the seen and unseen. Some were symbols of power, others of wisdom or peace, but all were loved in their own peculiar way. And as the ancient world begins to fade into shadow, you can almost imagine the faint sounds that filled its quiet corners. A cricket song drifting through a lantern-lit garden. A falcon's soft cry echoing over the desert dunes. A parrot repeating words of affection in a forgotten tongue. Each sound a heartbeat from the past, steady, rhythmic, eternal.
As we reach the quiet end of this ancient trail, we begin to see a pattern emerging, something both comforting and hauntingly familiar. Across continents and centuries, through temples and huts, palaces and gardens, one truth remained unchanged. Humans have always sought connection. The creatures they kept were not simply pets, they were reflections of who they were and what they believed about the world. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the hum of that connection still resonating, even now. A gentle continuity between us and them. The Romans with their dormice, the Persians with their falcons, the Egyptians with their sacred cats, all unknowingly whispering the same truth we still feel today. We are never truly alone so long as life stirs beside us. Let's drift through these echoes, softly and slowly. In the temples of ancient Egypt, the act of keeping a pet was more than affection. It was a dialogue with the gods. When a family cared for a cat, they were, in their eyes, caring for the spirit of Bastet, the goddess of home and fertility. When they buried that cat with care and ritual, they were not mourning a pet, they were sending a friend into eternity. The relationship between human and animal was, quite literally, divine. That sense of sacredness carried through many ancient societies. In India, to harm an animal was to harm one's own soul. The Buddhist and Jain monks fed pigeons, monkeys, even stray dogs, not out of obligation, but reverence. A small bowl of water placed outside one's home for passing creatures was a spiritual gesture, as though saying, "You belong here too." And that sentiment of belonging is perhaps the oldest form of empathy we know. Even in civilizations that prided themselves on conquest and control, the gentleness of pet keeping revealed something deeply human. Consider the Assyrians, whose kings ruled vast empires and led armies of unimaginable strength. In their towering palaces, relief carvings show them walking beside lions, not just as symbols of power, but as companions. One relief shows a lion resting calmly by the king's side, its head bowed, not in fear, but in recognition. There is something profound about that. The same hands that wielded swords also stroked fur. The same eyes that surveyed empires also watched a creature breathe softly in sleep. History often remembers the battles, but seldom the quiet moments of kindness that coexisted with them. In ancient Greece, philosophers often pondered the relationship between humans and animals. Aristotle wrote that animals could feel emotion, though in different measure than humans. Others disagreed. Yet many Greeks kept pets, dogs, birds, tortoises, not merely as curiosities, but as mirrors for thought. The great philosopher Diogenes was said to admire dogs for their honesty, calling them the purest of beings. He once remarked that if men could love as faithfully as dogs, the world would need fewer laws. Such sentiments remind us that pet keeping wasn't simply a pastime, it was a quiet philosophy. Through animals, ancient people explored loyalty, mortality, and love itself. They saw reflected in their companions both the beauty and fragility of life.
You drift eastward now, away from the marble noise of empires, and toward the land where quiet itself became an art form. Japan, during its ancient and medieval ages, was a world of gardens and shadows, of silk screens painted with cranes and pine trees bending in perfect poise. And somewhere within that tranquility, you begin to notice the smallest, most deliberate expressions of companionship. No roaring lions here, no sacred crocodiles. Instead, you find movement so delicate it could vanish if you blink too fast. A koi circling in a porcelain basin, a silkworm munching gently on a mulberry leaf, a lapdog sleeping beside a scroll of poetry.
In the dim light of a Heian-era courtyard, you see nobles moving with slow grace, their robes rustling like whispers. Their lives were defined by the aesthetics of stillness, and so were their pets. In the great houses of the aristocracy, people didn't keep animals for protection or sport. They kept them for reflection. A small dog, perhaps a Chin or a Shiba Inu's distant ancestor, would spend its days following the rustle of its owner's kimono. Its role was not to bark, but to exist beautifully. You watch one of these women, her face pale in candlelight, brush her dog's fur until it gleams. Each stroke is slow, intentional. The act of grooming itself becomes a meditation. You realize that here, animals were more than company. They were expressions of philosophy. Their quietness mirrored the human desire for inner peace. Scholars still argue whether the Japanese concept of mono noare, that tender sadness of impermanence, was shaped in part by this relationship with living creatures. To watch a silkworm spin its cocoon, or a carp swim endlessly beneath falling cherry blossoms, was to feel beauty and loss woven together. You step into a Heian garden, a small world enclosed by paper walls and wooden beams. The pond at its center mirrors the sky. Beneath that reflection, bright carp glide like moving jewels. The nobles of Kyoto prized their koi not just for color or elegance, but for patience. Watching them was an act of devotion. Time softened, breath slowed. Every ripple was a reminder that peace required nothing more than attention. If Rome celebrated the roar of power and Egypt worshipped the feline grace of gods, Japan found its sacredness in silence. Even the insects here were revered. At night, you hear the hum of crickets kept in small bamboo cages, suzumushi, singing insects. They weren't imprisoned, they were cherished. Their song was believed to soothe the mind and remind the listener that all things fade. When the chirping stopped, it was a gentle lesson in letting go. To the Japanese, even the smallest life held aesthetic value. That was beauty, that was philosophy. You wander next into the quarters of poets and monks. The air smells faintly of ink and pine. A monk sits cross-legged, a small sparrow perched beside him. He feeds it crumbs, smiling faintly. This is the world of Zen, where enlightenment might come not through grand revelation, but through the act of feeding a bird. You notice how the sparrow tilts its head, waiting, how the monk's hand trembles slightly before releasing each grain. The silence between them feels sacred. He doesn't name the bird, he doesn't claim it. To name something, he believes, is to separate yourself from it. Instead, he simply shares space with it. In this quiet companionship, you realize something. To ancient Japan, love wasn't possession. It was observation. You loved a thing by noticing it completely, by allowing it to be exactly what it was. And so, a silkworm weaving, a goldfish flicking its tail, a dog breathing softly at one's feet, all were seen as teachers of serenity. Outside the monastery, you find peasants, farmers, and fishermen who shared their lives with animals too. Not out of luxury, but out of rhythm. Cats guarded grain. Dogs protected doors. Oxen pulled carts. Yet even among the working class, there was a tenderness, an understanding that these creatures were part of a living cycle. You see a fisherman feeding bits of rice to a heron that follows his boat each morning. It's a quiet partnership. He knows that one day the heron may not return, and that's fine. In that understanding lies a profound peace. By the time of the Edo period, Japan's relationship with animals became almost ceremonial. The Tosa dog, for instance, was bred for loyalty and balance, not aggression. The Chin became a lap companion for the aristocracy, a living symbol of poise. And yet, even in the shogun's court, surrounded by formality, you see small gestures of affection. A child giggling as a puppy stumbles over its silk ribbon. An empress slipping her cat a bit of sweet bean paste when no one's watching. These moments, soft and fleeting, tell more truth about human nature than any decree or battle ever could.
The philosopher-poet Basho once wrote about watching a frog leap into an old pond. The sound of the splash, he said, contained the entire universe. That simple observation, so minimal, so patient, embodies everything the Japanese found sacred in their companionship with animals. Through their pets, they learned mindfulness before the word even existed. Each chirp, each ripple, each slow wag of a tail was a moment of pure awareness. Even now, centuries later, Japan's relationship with animals carries that same serenity. You can feel it in the quiet ritual of a tea garden where koi still glide beneath maple leaves, or in the tender way a grandmother ties a tiny bell around her cat's neck before dusk. The gesture is both practical and poetic, a soft sound to know the creature's safe return. As night deepens, you find yourself sitting on a wooden porch overlooking a moonlit pond. Crickets sing. The air is cool. Somewhere, a dog sighs in its sleep. The stillness feels infinite. You realize that this moment, this blend of companionship and silence, is exactly what the Japanese sought for centuries. A way to be close without clinging. A way to love without control. When the first light of dawn touches the pond, the koi shimmer beneath the surface, their scales catching the early glow. It's a reminder that beauty is not a thing to own, but a moment to witness. And in that reflection, you understand why ancient Japan's pets were so quiet, so delicate, so fleeting. They were not distractions from life's impermanence. They were its most perfect expression. One mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. During the Heian period, 794 to 1185 CE, noble women often carried tiny lapdogs in their robes, letting their heads peek out during poetry gatherings. It wasn't just fashion, it was affection wrapped in etiquette. These dogs even had miniature carriages for processions. A quirky detail? Sometimes they were perfumed with powdered incense, their fur brushed until it shone like lacquered wood. Yes, even in serenity, vanity had a place. But what makes it beautiful is that beneath all that formality, the affection was real. Their animals were their confidants, their living poetry. As you sit there, still by the pond, you can almost feel that same thread connecting your heartbeat to theirs, a gentle pulse that has survived 1,000 years. You realize that silence, when shared, is not emptiness, it's communion. So you breathe, deeply and quietly, and let that ancient stillness settle around you like a blanket. The koi move, the crickets sing, and somewhere in the distance, a small dog stretches in its sleep. You smile, because across all ages, all empires, all forms of belief, this is what companionship has always meant. Not noise, not ownership, but presence. Just two beings, sharing time, space, and breath. That's all it ever needed to be.
You wander now toward the warmth of the subcontinent, where the air smells of incense, rain-soaked earth, and something ancient yet familiar, devotion. This is India, where every creature breathes beneath the gaze of gods, and even the smallest life holds divine meaning. Here, animals aren't merely pets, they are souls in motion. Some worshipped, some wild, some woven into family. You can almost hear the hum of a temple bell in the distance as the scent of sandalwood drifts by. The closer you move, the more you notice it, the soft coexistence between human and beast. A cow strolls lazily through a marketplace. No one hurries it. A parrot calls out from a carved balcony, repeating mantras it has overheard. A child giggles as a monkey snatches a mango from his hand, and no one scolds it. They just laugh. You're not in a land of dominance here. You're in a land of gentle acceptance. In India's oldest texts, the Vedas, composed over 3,000 years ago, animals are described not as possessions, but as companions in the cosmic journey. Each creature is linked to a deity. The bull Nandi serves as the sacred mount of Lord Shiva. The owl carries the goddess Lakshmi. The mighty eagle Garuda serves as the loyal vehicle of Vishnu.
Even a tiny mouse scampering around your feet is sacred. It's the companion of Lord Ganesha. To see one is considered auspicious, a sign that blessings might follow. You realize that, to the ancient Indians, keeping an animal wasn't just companionship, it was participation in divine balance. To feed an animal was to feed the universe itself. In the shaded courtyards of small villages, you see families leaving bowls of water and grains outside their homes every morning. Birds swoop down, stray dogs drink, cows wander by, tails flicking lazily. No one calls this feeding pets, it's seva, service. For centuries, this act has been performed without reward, without expectation, just quiet duty, a gesture that says, you belong here too. Buddhist monks, dressed in simple saffron robes, take this idea even further. You watch one walking barefoot at dawn with a bowl of rice in hand. When he sits by a pond, a flock of pigeons surrounds him. He breaks small bits of rice and tosses them gently into the air. He doesn't speak, doesn't smile. His stillness says enough. Every movement is deliberate, every grain a prayer. The pigeons coo softly, their wings brushing his shoulder. And as the sun rises, golden and wide, you sense it, this bond between stillness and kindness that has anchored India's soul for millennia. Scholars still argue whether India's deep compassion for animals emerged from religion or ecology. Perhaps it was both. With rivers that flooded, forests that teemed with life, and climates that nurtured everything from elephants to ants, respect was survival. To live here was to coexist. Humans didn't stand apart from nature, they knelt within it. In ancient Indus Valley cities, archaeologists have found tiny clay figurines, bulls, dogs, birds, often placed beside human idols. They weren't decorations, they were prayers sculpted in mud, reminders that the bond between man and animal began not in ownership, but gratitude. You move onward through time, into the grand palaces of ancient kingdoms. There, pets weren't just part of daily life, they were symbols of spirit and fortune. Elephants adorned with gold caparisons led royal processions, their massive forms swaying to the rhythm of drums. Yet behind the grandeur was something surprisingly intimate. A king might whisper softly into his elephant's ear before battle, not to command, but to ask for courage. Chronicles describe elephants who refused to leave their master's sides even after death, a loyalty so deep that poets turned it into legend. In one such tale, from the Mahabharata, a warrior's horse kneels beside his fallen rider and refuses to eat. Days pass, the horse dies there too, not from hunger, but from devotion. Even in myth, loyalty wasn't a virtue taught to animals, it was revealed through them. Then there were parrots, bright, talkative, and endlessly curious. Ancient Sanskrit poetry praises their ability to mimic human voices, often describing them as tiny sages in feathers. In royal courts, parrots were taught verses of love and wisdom. They weren't just entertainers, they were teachers of patience and joy. A quirky detail survives from those times. Noble families would sometimes teach their parrots to chant mantras so that the house was always reciting prayers, even when everyone else slept. You smile imagining that, a small green bird softly chanting to the gods in the middle of the night, a feathered monk keeping spiritual watch while humans dreamed. And then there are the cows, the sacred mothers of India. You see one now, her large brown eyes calm, her breath slow and steady as she walks past a temple gate. In her gaze is something timeless, unhurried. Cows were, and still are, symbols of life and nourishment. The ancient texts say that every god resides within her form, that her milk sustains the universe. To harm her, unthinkable. To feed her, a blessing. Even the poorest family will share a handful of grain or a slice of roti with the cow that wanders by, not because it's custom, but because it feels right. The bond is quiet, invisible, yet deeply sacred. As you wander deeper through the centuries, you find that this tenderness extended beyond religion. In the Mughal courts, emperors kept their own menageries, not just of power, but of curiosity.
Akbar the Great had entire gardens filled with animals, and he insisted they be treated kindly. Chroniclers wrote of him personally tending to deer and birds, feeding them fruit by hand. One historical fact lingers. Emperor Jahangir kept a private journal where he documented the personalities of each of his animals: his lion who preferred mangoes, his parrot who greeted him by name. It reads not like a king's inventory, but like a man's diary of friends. Scholars still debate whether his fascination was spiritual or scientific, but perhaps it was both. Maybe Jahangir simply found what all humans eventually discover, that to understand animals is to understand oneself. In the countryside, far from palaces, this bond continued in simpler forms. A shepherd sleeping beneath the stars with his goats clustered around him. A child sharing sugarcane with a monkey perched on a banyan branch. A potter's family letting their parrot rest on their clay jars while they dry in the sun. Each gesture small, but layered with affection. You sense that, for ancient India, pets were not hobbies, they were emotional landscapes. They reminded people to live gently, to observe, to care. You reach a temple at dusk. The air is warm, glowing with oil lamps. A priest rings a small brass bell. Behind him, a cow dozes peacefully, and a group of stray dogs curl near the steps. No one chases them away. They are part of the ritual, silent witnesses to devotion. When the prayers end, people step outside and scatter food across the ground. Birds descend, dogs wag their tails, even a curious mongoose scurries out from the shadows. You realize you've just watched something ancient yet ongoing, the eternal circle of giving and receiving. Humans feeding life, life feeding gratitude. Night settles slowly. The stars bloom above like scattered marigolds. Somewhere, a peacock cries, a lonely, haunting sound. You close your eyes and imagine the ancient poets who once described that cry as the voice of longing itself. To them, every sound, every breath was a message from the divine, carried through feathers and fur. And maybe, just maybe, that's the secret of India's gentle bonds. They never separated the sacred from the living. To love an animal was to pray. To care for one was to heal. As the night deepens, you hear one last sound. A cow's slow exhale, a bird's faint chirp, a child whispering good night to the monkey outside her window. And in that chorus of simple noises, you feel what ancient India understood all along. Kindness is not a philosophy, it's an instinct. And it has always started with the way we treat those who cannot speak.
You travel now through a warmer wind, the scent of sandalwood and jasmine curling through the night. You are no longer in the stone courtyards of Rome or the marble silence of Greece. The ground beneath your feet hums with the pulse of something older, deeper, India. Here, companionship is not a leisure hobby or a show of wealth. It is a sacred extension of life itself. Animals are not merely owned, they are honored, sometimes even worshipped. You walk past a temple courtyard glowing in lamplight. A cow moves slowly through the space, her hide glistening under the oil lamps. Nobody hurries her. Devotees part gently, murmuring prayers. The sound of her bell becomes part of the rhythm, a lullaby of faith and patience. In this ancient world, cows are not pets in the Western sense, yet they are far more than livestock. They are treated as maternal figures, embodiments of generosity. You see a small boy offering the cow a ball of dough, his hands reverent, his eyes soft with the kind of affection that feels timeless. Farther down, you find parrots perched on carved wooden railings, whispering back Sanskrit chants they've overheard from the priests. The air around them vibrates with their chatter, half sacred, half mischief. Families keep them not for show, but as talking extensions of the household. The belief lingers that parrots can carry your secrets to the gods, if you treat them kindly. You can almost imagine one whispering a prayer into the dawn sky, wings flashing emerald and gold. In another lane, you hear the low rumble of an elephant's footsteps. The ground trembles slightly, but not out of fear. The elephant's keeper, a wiry man with calm eyes, walks beside it,
his palm resting on its trunk as if greeting an old friend. There's no spectacle here. This is partnership. The animal and the man move together with a kind of shared patience, the kind that only comes from years of trust. The elephant's eyes are slow blinks of peace, its tusks capped in bronze, its skin patterned with care. Scholars still argue whether elephants were truly pets or sacred workers, but you can sense the emotional thread that binds them, devotion disguised as duty. You wander through time to palaces where kings once kept trained peacocks. They strutted across gardens like living jewels, their tails a performance of divine excess. One ruler, legend says, had peacocks painted with powdered gold before a festival procession, not out of cruelty, but in worship of the god Kartikeya, whose mount was the peacock. The sight must have shimmered like a dream, 100 birds glowing like suns, strutting before a silent crowd. Somewhere else, a quiet ascetic sits cross-legged beside a lake, a monkey curled against his knees. The water ripples as lotus petals drift past. The sage reaches into a pouch, shares a bit of fruit. The monkey eats and rests its head against his arm. The moment is so still that time itself seems to pause. In India's ancient philosophy, compassion extends across all beings. The human soul is not higher, just differently shaped. You can feel that here, in this shared silence between monk and animal. You continue, your feet brushing dust that glows faintly under moonlight. A child passes you, cradling a mongoose in a sling. It watches you with glittering eyes, alert, intelligent. The villagers say it keeps cobras at bay, but the way the boy strokes its fur suggests more than practicality. It's friendship born out of survival, a bond forged in necessity. The mongoose is both protector and pet, living proof that affection can bloom even in fear. Everywhere you turn, animals seem woven into daily rhythm. Crows hop along rooftops, fed offerings each morning. The first morsel of the day belongs to them. Dogs wander temple steps, blessed with tilak marks on their foreheads. In some regions, entire festivals celebrate them. Garlands draped around their necks, food served in silver bowls. You can almost hear the soft laughter of people as they bend to feed their four-legged companions. The scene feels ancient and absurdly gentle at once, the kind of tenderness that transcends millennia. And then there are the sacred snakes. In forest shrines, priests leave bowls of milk for cobras, believed to be guardians of the divine. You stand at a respectful distance, sensing the edge between reverence and risk. The snake uncoils slowly, tongue flickering like a whisper. Scholars still debate whether these rituals were symbolic or literal, but to the worshippers, the serpent's presence was as real as breath. You realize that in these lands, fear and love often walk the same path. You drift through the centuries, seeing how pet-keeping blended seamlessly into spiritual practice. A king might keep a parrot not to amuse guests, but because he believed the bird carried fragments of prophecy. A family might cherish a bull for generations, decorating its horns on harvest days. A widow might whisper her grief to a small dog who sleeps by her door. The lines blur, devotion, affection, faith, all merging into one long heartbeat. The air grows cooler as dawn begins to stir somewhere beyond the horizon. You pause by a riverside, where fishermen light incense before casting nets. Beside them sits a dog, patient and proud, waiting for scraps. Its tail sweeping slow arcs through the dust. It's been fed here for years, they say, and every morning it returns, silent, dependable. It doesn't belong to anyone, and yet everyone calls it theirs. Maybe that's what compassion really meant in this world. Not ownership, but belonging without possession. You listen to the hum of early life, temple bells, parrots, cowbells, the rumble of elephants far away. India's ancient pets weren't just animals to adore. They were living metaphors for patience, loyalty, and the eternal cycle of care. You feel it seep into you like warm milk, the realization that compassion, at its core, is a sacred act of noticing. As you start to drift,
You sense echoes from earlier civilizations, the Roman luxury, the Egyptian devotion, all dissolving into this tender stillness. Here, love for animals isn't about dominance or display. It's about seeing something divine in another heartbeat. You let that thought rest with you like a gentle weight.
You step onto the vast continent of Africa, where sunlight filters through endless savannas, rivers snake through dense jungles, and the horizon stretches wide and limitless. Here, life hums with a rhythm older than memory, and the bond between humans and animals takes on forms both practical and sacred. In the villages of ancient Egypt, we have glimpsed cats revered as deities. But beyond the Nile, in the diverse cultures of sub-Saharan Africa, people cultivated relationships with creatures that were at once wild, domestic, and deeply symbolic. You can almost hear the distant echo of drums and the rustle of grass as you move through these ancient lands. In the Sahel and savannas, humans and dogs formed enduring partnerships long before written records. Hunting dogs accompanied hunters over rolling plains, their keen senses an extension of human skill. You watch a hunter pause beside a herd of antelope, his dog crouched at his side, muscles tense, eyes sharp. The trust between them is silent, instinctive. Scholars still argue whether the earliest African hunting dogs were selectively bred or naturally cooperative with humans, but the bond is unmistakable. Life moving in tandem, a mutual understanding forged across countless generations. These dogs were more than tools. They were companions who shared meals, warmth, and danger. In some communities, they even took part in rituals, decorated with beads or small bells during ceremonies. Their presence was woven into the rhythm of daily life, a quiet acknowledgement that human survival was not solitary. You wander now into the lush forests and river valleys of West Africa, where monkeys and small primates appear in folklore, art, and household life. Children play with them, mothers allow them near hearths, and artists carve their likenesses into wood and clay. You can almost hear the playful chatter of these animals as they dart between homes, their tiny hands and feet grasping at sunlight and leaves. To humans here, these creatures are mirrors of curiosity, mischief, and cleverness, qualities that make them part of storytelling and imagination. The Yoruba people, for instance, revered monkeys in ritual contexts. Some deities were believed to take simian form, and the animals were considered messengers between worlds. You realize that in these societies, pets are not merely companions, they are living participants in spiritual dialogue, acting as bridges between the human and the divine. Across the savannas and deserts, cattle were both life and ritual. The Maasai, whose culture stretches back centuries, have long depended on cows for nourishment, mobility, and social identity. Each cow carries a name, a personality, a place in the household. A young warrior might wake before dawn to tend a small herd, greeting each animal as an equal participant in the day's journey. You sense that here, animals are far more than property. They are family, teachers, even advisors. A quirky detail from ethnographic records, some Maasai families would sleep in close proximity to calves to ensure warmth and protection, fostering a silent bond of loyalty. Imagine the cool night air on bare skin, a small heartbeat pressing against yours, and the comfort of knowing that mutual trust exists without words. In the jungles of Central Africa, primates are observed, respected, and occasionally kept for short-term companionship. Shamans and healers often work with animals to interpret omens or teach patience. A young boy might gently hold a baby chimpanzee as part of a rite of passage, the creature's eyes wide and searching, reflecting the gravity of the moment. Here you notice a subtle theme recurring across continents. Animals are not subordinate. They are collaborators in understanding life's patterns. The wild and the domestic blur. Lions, leopards, and cheetahs appear in art and storytelling, sometimes kept in captivity for status, sometimes revered at a distance. Their presence commands respect, not fear. You imagine a king in a ceremonial enclosure, observing his big cats,
not merely for display, but as living reminders of strength and vigilance. In North Africa, particularly in the Berber and Saharan regions, camels were both practical and emotional companions. Their immense value as transport and survival tools was paired with careful attention to their well-being. You picture a lone traveler on a desert night, the stars bright above, resting beside a camel whose steady breathing offers reassurance against the vast emptiness. Scholars still debate whether the emotional bond between human and camel was symbolic or genuine affection, but standing there, you can feel the quiet depth of it. It is not a flashy companionship. It is subtle, measured, enduring. And it reminds you of something fundamental. Connection does not need grandeur to be profound. Across Africa, birds also carried sacred and practical significance. You imagine African gray parrots, whose intelligence and vocal mimicry earned them places in human homes and rituals. Some were believed to communicate with ancestors, their voices bridging worlds. You watch a parrot tilt its head as a child whispers a secret. The bird repeats it softly, a living echo, and you realize that even playful animals were intertwined with human belief and storytelling. And in coastal regions, you hear of fishermen keeping small dolphins nearby, not as pets, but as guides. These dolphins would lead them to fish-rich waters, an ancient form of partnership that borders on the mystical. The line between utility, friendship, and reverence dissolves. Africa's ancient relationships with animals demonstrates versatility. Fierce, gentle, spiritual, practical. You notice that the continent's diversity mirrors the range of creatures themselves. From deserts to forests, mountains to rivers, every human-animal interaction carries weight. Dogs, cats, cattle, primates, birds, camels, each species has a story, a rhythm, a quiet presence that shapes human life. Even the small, everyday gestures matter. A child offering a scrap of food to a dog or a mother smoothing a monkey's fur embody the same timeless truth, seen across the world. Affection requires attention, and attention transforms survival into companionship. As the sun begins to set in your imagination, casting long shadows over savannas and villages, you reflect on the common threads of these relationships. Loyalty, patience, care, and reverence are universal. Across cultures and continents, humans have always sought the comfort of a creature's presence, whether to reflect divinity, to observe life's rhythms, or simply to share silence at the end of the day. You hear the evening calls of nocturnal birds, the distant roar of a lion, the soft padding of a dog on a stone path. In these sounds, you recognize a kind of continuity, a heartbeat that stretches back thousands of years. Across Africa's deserts, jungles, and plains, ancient humans understood something that resonates still. To live fully is to acknowledge life around you, to respect it, and to love it, even in its smallest forms. Night falls fully now. Stars prick the sky above vast landscapes. A gentle breeze carries scents of grass, earth, and distant smoke from cooking fires. Somewhere, a dog curls beside its human companion. Somewhere, a parrot whispers soft words into the darkness. Somewhere, a camel rests under a tent, breathing calmly beside its owner. And in this quiet, you feel the universal thread, the connection between human and animal stretching across Africa, across millennia, across the world. You sense that companionship is not a modern luxury, nor a fleeting amusement. It is essential, timeless, and profoundly intimate. As you take a slow breath, you realize that each story, each pet, each bond is a note in a symphony of life, gentle, intricate, enduring. And as sleep draws near, you carry with you the knowledge that humans have always been comforted by the creatures around them, and that comfort is still alive today.
You now find yourself in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, where the rivers Euphrates and Tigris weave life into clay and mud. Here, humans first built cities, first wrote stories, first carved the image of themselves into history. And alongside them, animals moved quietly through streets, temples, and palaces, leaving traces of companionship that ripple even to your imagination tonight. The first thing you notice is the strange blend of wild and domestic. Dogs padded beside merchant sandals, cats slinked along the walls, and oxen labored in the fields. Yet the cityscape is punctuated by lions, bulls, and hybrid creatures, part real, part divine, whose depictions in clay tablets and reliefs suggest a culture fascinated by the border between the ordinary and the sacred. You wander down a narrow street in past mud-brick houses where children chase small dogs, their laughter mingling with the braying of donkeys and the cooing of doves. These animals are not simply helpers or entertainment, they carry significance in the rhythm of daily life. Scholars still argue whether domestic cats, for instance, were truly tamed or merely tolerated for their skill at hunting rodents. Yet the presence of feline figurines and tomb depictions suggests more, a quiet reverence for creatures that bridged practicality and mysticism. A quirky detail comes to mind. Some households kept small dogs in baskets or decorated crates, occasionally perfuming their fur with fragrant oils. Not unlike Egyptian practices, yes, but here it feels more intimate, less ceremonial. You can almost imagine a child peeking through the mud wall, giggling as their dog shakes off a sprinkle of rosewater, tiny paws skidding across the floor. The Mesopotamians also kept oxen and sheep, animals crucial for agriculture, food, and trade. But alongside these practical companions, sacred bulls, lamasun in the imagination, roamed in art, guarding temples with faces of humans and bodies of beasts. These creatures, though stylized and monumental, echo a worldview where animals were intertwined with protection, power, and mystery. You sense a subtle lesson in their hybrid forms, that the qualities humans admired, strength, wisdom, vigilance, were often mirrored in the creatures that shared their world. In temple courtyards, you imagine priests feeding birds and small mammals, leaving food for animals considered emissaries of gods. The act of caring was simultaneously pragmatic and spiritual. A pigeon might carry omens, a cat might guard sacred grains, and a dog might serve as the quiet sentinel of a courtyard. Life and devotion were inseparable. You peek into a palace chamber where a small lapdog, its fur meticulously groomed, sleeps on a woven mat near a noble's feet. The dog is not a mere accessory. Its proximity signals trust and affection. Kings and high officials often treated these animals almost like silent advisors, companions in reflection. Scholars debate whether this was truly companionship or a projection of status, but the careful attention suggests something more, a recognition of life beyond human ambition. In the marketplace, merchants keep pigeons and doves, letting them flutter freely before capturing them for sale. Their plumage glimmers in the sun. A child watches in awe as a dove perches on a merchant's shoulder, pecking gently at a morsel of grain. The simple exchange of food and presents carries an unspoken lesson. Observing and nurturing life creates bonds that transcend language. Lions, while mostly wild, appear in ceremonial contexts. They are tamed just enough to impress, rarely for companionship. Yet their power shapes the human imagination. Reliefs depict kings wrestling lions or lions poised beside thrones, symbols of strength, courage, and the thin line between reverence and fear. A historical fact lingers. Some rulers kept lions in captivity not only to display might, but to connect spiritually to the cosmic order. The bond, though dangerous, reveals a desire to share existence with creatures that embody the divine. Meanwhile, cats, small, elegant, silent hunters, stalk the streets. Their presence is practical, yes, keeping vermin away, but also symbolic. You imagine a small family leaving milk out for the cat each evening, whispering to it as it laps quietly, acknowledging a shared moment of peace. The gesture is small but profound, a recognition that care can be simple and direct. Dogs, oxen, cats, pigeons, and symbolic beasts all share a space that is at once practical and mystical. You drift past a ziggurat, the air warm with incense, the sounds of prayer and commerce intertwined.
Someone releases a dove, and it spirals upward, wings catching the sunlight. You think about the countless humans who have stood here before, feeling the same awe, the same curiosity, the same quiet respect. Even in the bustle of city life, humans made space for the sacredness of animal life. A quirky Mesopotamian custom comes to mind. Some wealthy households decorated small cages for songbirds with intricate carvings, tiny mirrors, and painted designs, creating miniature worlds for their winged companions. It wasn't only to impress visitors, it was a reflection of care, attention, and aesthetic delight. You can almost hear the faint chirps bouncing off mud brick walls, a lullaby for anyone passing by. You wander toward the riverbank at dusk, where oxen pull clay-laden carts through soft mud, dogs trot alongside children, and cats bask on sun-warmed stones. The sky darkens, reflecting orange and pink hues on the water. The city hums with life, and animals are woven into the very rhythm of existence. This coexistence isn't flashy, it's essential. Humans and animals have always relied on one another in ways both tangible and spiritual. Scholars still argue whether Mesopotamian society regarded animals as equals in moral terms or merely functional beings. But as you watch a cat lazily stretching beside a merchant, a pigeon landing on a priest's shoulder, and a dog nudging a child's hand for a scrap of bread, you sense a deeper truth. Respect and care can exist even without explicit doctrine. You pause to imagine a funeral procession where dogs walk beside the mourners, pigeons are released into the sky, and cats sit silently at thresholds, witnesses to grief. Animals share in rituals of life and death, bridging humans to the sacred, to the ephemeral, to one another. You realize that Mesopotamia's mysterious companions were not only pets, they were mediators, observers, guardians, and silent confidants. Even in the smallest gestures, the culture's philosophy emerges. Offering milk to a cat, feeding a pigeon, brushing a dog's fur. These acts are intimate acknowledgments of connection. They are reminders that human life does not exist in isolation, and that attention to another living being cultivates patience, empathy, and quiet joy. As night descends fully, the Tigris glimmers under the moon, mirroring stars like scattered jewels. A dog rests against a wall, cats pad silently along rooftops, and pigeons roost atop temple beams. Somewhere, a lion's relief gleams under torchlight, frozen yet alive in stone. You notice a subtle echo across all civilizations. Whether through worship, practicality, or companionship, humans have always reached for the lives of other creatures to teach, comfort, and inspire. The quiet presence of these animals, real and symbolic, whispers a soft truth. Life is richer when shared, and care is a universal language. You breathe slowly, feeling a resonance with every small paw, feather, and breath. The ancient world feels close now, tangible, gentle, as if the animals themselves are guiding you to the rhythm of their lives. As you settle into the night, you imagine the sound of soft purrs, distant barking, the flutter of wings, and the slow, steady exhale of beasts resting. Mesopotamia's pets were companions in the deepest sense, bridging worlds between work and worship, domesticity and divinity, life and legend. And in that thought, you find peace.
You now step into the ancient lands of China, where rivers like the Yangtze and Yellow stretch wide, mountains rise like guardians, and civilization hums quietly through bamboo forests and palace halls. Here, the bond between humans and animals reaches elegance, symbolism, and ritual. It is a world where a small paw or feather can carry stories of empire, philosophy, and folklore. You wander along a quiet courtyard of a Han Dynasty home, mist curling from a nearby stream. A small lapdog rests on the marble floor, its fur brushed to a soft sheen. Children sneak past, giggling as the dog lifts a paw in greeting. This is not merely amusement, it is companionship steeped in attention, patience, and quiet joy. Scholars still argue whether these lapdogs were considered purely decorative or genuine family members, but the care evident in their treatment suggests the latter. In imperial palaces, animals were both symbols of power and companions of leisure. Pekingese dogs, with their flat faces and flowing fur, were treasured pets of emperors, carried in small baskets or allowed to roam palace halls. Their presence was intimate, their company valued not only for aesthetics but for comfort and companionship. You imagine an emperor kneeling beside a dog, whispering in a quiet, private moment, the world beyond the palace walls fading to a distant hum. Peacocks, pheasants, and other birds filled palace aviaries, their brilliant plumage reflecting candlelight. Some were taught to sing simple tunes, while others strutted freely among carefully tended gardens. Birds in China were not only admired for beauty, they were tied to fortune, health, and cosmic balance. A scholar might release a bird at dawn, believing it carried messages to heaven, while a child simply laughed at its playful movements. Both were right in their own way. Koi fish swam lazily in clear ponds, scales glinting like liquid gold. You lean over, mesmerized by their serene movement. Families kept them for luck, for calm, for reflection. Feeding a koi was a meditative ritual, a way to synchronize one's heartbeat with a slower, gentler rhythm. Some ponds were large enough to carry the reflection of the moon across the water, creating a fleeting bridge between sky and earth. Even in the smallest ripple, the presence of the fish was a living lesson in patience and observation. Dogs, birds, and fish were not the only companions. Monkeys, though rarer, appeared in both folk tales and as live companions in wealthy households. They were mischievous, clever, and endlessly entertaining, their antics a reminder of the unpredictability and liveliness of life. A small monkey might perch on a balcony railing, reaching for fruit, while a child watches with wide eyes, learning both care and boundaries. In folk stories, animals take on layers of meaning that blend myth and reality. The fox spirit, for instance, appears as a cunning yet sometimes helpful companion, teaching lessons of morality, cunning, or love. Scholars still debate how much of folklore reflected real animals versus metaphorical teaching tools, but the stories themselves influenced how humans treated living creatures. Even today, these tales remind you that animals in China were never simply property. They were teachers, symbols, and co-inhabitants of the world. A quirky detail lingers. Some households kept crickets in ornate cages, their chirping considered a form of music. These tiny companions were cherished, trained, and listened to with the same patience and delight that one might give to a human performer. You can imagine evenings spent quietly listening to the delicate rhythm of their song, a subtle reminder that life can be found in the smallest forms. Cats, of course, roamed homes and palaces, hunting rodents and offering quiet companionship. They were celebrated in art, often depicted with playful poses and serene expressions. Families sometimes left small offerings of food or milk for them, appreciating their silent diligence. Unlike the ceremonial or symbolic roles of larger animals, cats were intimate partners in daily life, reminding humans of the quiet joys of presence and attention. Scholars still argue whether certain breeds, like the lion-headed Pekingese, were bred for companionship or symbolism. But the meticulous care given to grooming, feeding, and attention suggests that the emotional bond was central. You imagine a child brushing the fur of a small dog, or a scholar whispering softly to a cat while studying scrolls. Both moments of quiet connection that ripple through time. Even larger animals, like horses and elephants, were revered for utility and beauty. Imperial stables were home to horses trained for both ceremonial and practical purposes. Riders and animals moved as one, synchronized in grace and discipline. Elephants, imported for court ceremonies, were symbols of majesty and stability, often painted and adorned with colorful fabrics. Yet behind the grandeur was intimacy. The emperor or noble might whisper to an elephant before a procession, seeking calm in both himself and the animal.
In rural areas, you see another kind of bond. Farmers caring for oxen and water buffalo, guiding them gently through rice paddies. The animals pull carts, till fields, and provide life-sustaining milk. Yet the humans show patient attention. You realize that utility does not preclude affection. In fact, the two often enhance each other. Birds, dogs, fish, cats, monkeys, horses, and elephants form a rich mosaic of companionship. Each connection unique, but threaded with common principles: patience, respect, and attention. China's approach to pets is not flamboyant, but refined, not distant, but embedded in daily rhythm. You watch a koi swirl beneath your fingertips, hear a cricket chirp softly, and feel the heartbeat of a small dog sleeping at your side. Each is a gentle reminder of the slow, mindful bond humans have nurtured across centuries. Even in folklore, these relationships echo. The fox teaches caution and cunning, the crane signals longevity, the cat embodies serenity. Animals become not just companions, but guides, co-teaches in navigating the human experience. You sense that ancient Chinese households approached animals not as possessions, but co-inhabitants of a shared world. Night descends fully, mist curling over palace roofs and bamboo groves. Lanterns glow softly, reflecting in koi ponds and polished stone floors. Somewhere, a small peking knees sleeps near a scholar's mat. A parrot repeats a softly whispered poem. Crickets continue their quiet concert. You feel a pulse, subtle and steady, connecting humans to animals, daily life to spiritual presence, small acts of care to vast, enduring philosophies. In this moment, you understand a fundamental lesson. Companionship is universal, but it carries the flavor of its place. In China, it is elegance, mindfulness, and ritualized attention. Feeding, brushing, listening, watching, these are acts that ripple outward, shaping not only animals' lives, but human character, patience, and joy. As you settle into the calm night, the presence of these creatures lingers in your mind. Their quiet companionship teach you to slow your breath, to notice the small, and to honor the pulse of life around you. Even across centuries, even across cultures, the lesson is consistent. Care is timeless, presence is sacred, and animals have always been our mirrors, guides, and companions.
You now step onto the cobblestone streets of medieval Europe, where the smell of wood smoke mingles with fresh bread and castle towers rise over bustling villages. The world feels slower, yet alive with rituals, markets, and small domestic dramas. Here, human-animal relationships take on forms both practical and eccentric, noble and whimsical. You now drift eastward into the sprawling lands of the Ottoman Empire, where the streets of Istanbul hum with commerce, the call to prayer echoes over domes and minarets, and the Bosphorus glimmers beneath a soft sunlight. In this vibrant empire, humans and animals share a life of luxury, ritual, and quiet companionship, often in forms both exotic and surprising. You wander through a sultan's palace courtyard, where the scent of jasmine drifts on the breeze.
Birds chatter in gilded cages, peacocks preen among manicured gardens, and small dogs follow attendants with soft, eager paws. These animals are more than decoration. They are companions, entertainers, and subtle markers of care. Scholars still argue whether exotic pets were primarily status symbols or true companions, but you notice the attention lavished on them. Silk bedding, fresh food, perfumed water, and daily interaction. Dogs are everywhere, from playful lapdogs to sturdy hunting companions. Small breeds, often gifted from foreign dignitaries, are pampered in baskets and embroidered pillows. You imagine a child sneaking into a quiet hallway to stroke a Pomeranian or Maltese, feeling the soft fur beneath their fingertips. The Sultan may not notice, yet the bond between child and dog is tender and unspoken. Outside the palace walls, hunting dogs accompany men on falconing trips across rolling hills and riverbanks, combining sport, skill, and intimacy in one seamless rhythm. Horses are equally central to Ottoman life. You hear the soft clatter of hooves on cobblestones as finely trained Anatolian horses move through stables. Riders run hands along glossy coats, murmuring quietly as they groom and calm their mounts. The horses are more than utility. They are extensions of the rider's presence, mirrors of discipline and trust. Scholars debate how much affection Ottoman horsemen felt versus the practical necessity of training, yet the intricate routines of grooming, feeding, and whispering to horses hint at a bond richer than duty alone. Exotic animals, however, steal the imagination. Palace records hint at cheetahs, monkeys, and even lions kept as private companions or ceremonial attractions. You picture a cheetah lounging on a velvet cushion, its sleek body alert yet relaxed, while an attendant gently strokes its fur. The animal is both danger and delight, reminding humans of the delicate balance between wildness and control. Scholars still argue whether these animals were seen as mere spectacle or semi-domesticated companions, but you sense that the quiet, attentive care reveals genuine connection. Peacocks and other birds flourish in palace gardens. Their feathers glimmer like sunlight on water, and they are free to roam, calling softly as they move among fountains and hedges. Some birds are taught songs or trained to dance lightly on outstretched fingers. You watch a bird flutter to the sultan's shoulder, tilting its head as if listening to whispered counsel. Even in opulence, you notice small gestures of intimacy, a servant replacing a perch, offering water, observing the bird's subtle movements. These acts echo a timeless principle. Attention is the foundation of companionship. Monkeys occupy an odd, playful niche. They are mischievous, often clothed in tiny outfits for ceremonial amusement, yet attendants treat them carefully, feeding, cleaning, and watching for distress. You imagine a monkey tugging at a child's sleeve, eliciting laughter that reverberates through the marble halls. Even scholars debating the role of exotic pets in Ottoman society cannot ignore the evident care invested in these creatures' daily lives. Crickets and small songbirds add another layer of intimacy. Kept in delicate cages, they perform their music quietly, creating a serene atmosphere in private chambers. You imagine a sultan pausing in his study, listening to the subtle rhythm of a cricket's chirp, a smile touching his lips. It is a miniature companionship, yet profoundly affecting. In this empire, animals were woven into every level of life, ceremonial, practical, and deeply personal. Hunting expeditions often reveal the layered bond between humans and animals. Falcons and hunting dogs move as one. The sultan or noble coordinates gestures with practiced patience. You picture a dog crouching low as a falcon takes wing, both attuned to instinct and command.
Scholars still debate whether hunting animals were valued more for sport or relationship, but the subtle glances, hand signals, and mutual awareness suggest an intimate choreography of trust. Even in pursuit of prey, the act becomes a quiet meditation on connection. Large cats, such as lions or leopards, appear in palace menageries. Though mostly ceremonial, these creatures are treated with care, fed daily, observed, and respected for their power. You imagine a lion pacing calmly under watchful eyes, its presence both awe-inspiring and comforting to the attendants nearby. The bond is complex, blending fear, respect, and attention. It mirrors broader Ottoman philosophy. Humans and animals occupy intertwined spheres of power, ritual, and daily life. Domestic animals, like dogs and cats, were also highly personalized companions. Purring cats curl in private chambers, watching the world with keen eyes. Dogs wag their tails beside resting humans, nudging hands for affection or small treats. These moments are simple yet deeply intimate, often overlooked by visitors or scholars, but critical in understanding the rhythm of human-animal life in the empire. You sense a quiet lesson. It is in everyday gestures that companionship thrives. Even pigeons played a role, used for communication and leisure. Some were trained to deliver messages across the city, while others simply offered companionship through soft cooing and fluttering wings. You imagine a child releasing a pigeon from a balcony, watching it ascend, a quiet smile on their face. The bird carries a small piece of joy into the wider world, linking human care to freedom and trust. By twilight, the palace gardens glow softly. Fountains gurgle quietly, peacocks preen in amber light, dogs settle on cushioned floors, and birds chirp as evening falls. The scent of jasmine mingles with earth and stone. Somewhere, a cheetah yawns, a monkey curls beside a basket, a horse exhales in its stall. Every creature embodies an aspect of daily life: leisure, ritual, companionship, and attentiveness. In the soft hum of the evening, you realize a central truth of the Ottoman world. Exotic pets were not merely symbols of power, but integral companions who required patience, attention, and care. From lapdogs to lions, falcons to crickets, the empire cultivated a rich tapestry of relationships with animals, each unique but all tied by the universal principle of attentiveness and respect. You breathe slowly, absorbing the rhythm of palace life and the subtle pulse of companionship. Even across centuries and cultural divides, the Ottoman Empire reminds you that the heart of human-animal connection is universal. Observation, patience, gentle care, and the quiet acknowledgement of life beyond yourself. As night deepens, the hum of water, soft footsteps, and subtle animal sounds lull you toward calm. The palace settles, the creatures rest, and the soft presence of animals teaches you a final, timeless lesson. Companionship, no matter how exotic or humble, is a gentle, enduring force that shapes the soul and soothes the spirit.
You now drift across oceans and mountains into the ancient lands of the Americas, where jagged peaks meet endless plains, rivers carve valleys, and civilizations bloom with color and sound. From the Andes to Mesoamerica, from the Mississippi Valley to the Amazon, humans and animals share lives that are practical, spiritual, and profoundly interconnected. You wander through a bustling Aztec marketplace. Dogs trot beside children, small parrots chatter in cages, and turkeys strut amid baskets of maize. Here, animals are woven into daily existence, as food, as guardians, as companions, and as sacred beings. The Aztecs, for instance, revered the Xoloitzcuintli, a small, hairless dog believed to guide souls through the afterlife. You watch a family tending to one of these dogs, brushing its skin gently, speaking to it softly. Scholars still debate whether this devotion was primarily spiritual or emotional, but the care is unmistakable, intimate, and enduring. Llamas and alpacas roam the Andean highlands, their wool treasured, their presence vital. You imagine a shepherd walking slowly along mountain paths, gently guiding a small herd, pausing to scratch an animal behind the ears. The bond is subtle, built on shared survival, rhythm, and trust. Quirky details emerge. Some communities would decorate llamas with small, colorful tassels for festivals, blending utility with celebration. The animals, though essential to livelihood, are also participants in joy, ritual, and identity. Birds hold symbolic significance across the Americas. Parrots, macaws, and hummingbirds appear in art, rituals, and daily life. You imagine a hummingbird darting near a child's hand, wings a blur of color, the child pausing to marvel at its speed and delicate beauty. Birds were often believed to carry messages from gods or ancestors, bridging human and spiritual realms. Feeding or observing them became an act of contemplation, a quiet acknowledgement of life beyond the human world. You wander into a Maya village at dusk. Children play with small dogs, their laughter mixing with the calls of coatis and other small animals. Dogs serve as companions, hunters, and guides. Scholars still argue whether dogs were domesticated primarily for companionship or for ritual utility, yet small acts, stroking fur, sharing scraps of food, reveal a universal thread. Care, attention, and affection transcend purpose. Turkeys, llamas, guinea pigs, and even jaguar cubs in rare ceremonial contexts occupy human attention. A ceremonial jaguar cub might be part of a festival, its stripes a symbol of strength, its presence both awe-inspiring and tender. Keepers feed and observe it carefully, balancing reverence with daily needs. You notice that across Mesoamerica, sacred animals often lived intimately with humans, teaching lessons of respect, patience, and attentiveness. In North America, indigenous peoples cultivated deep bonds with animals beyond the domestic. Wolves, foxes, deer, and bison feature in both survival and spirituality. You watch a small ceremony near a river, where a wolf is honored as a teacher and guide. Its howl echoes across water and stone, and you feel the silent connection between human and beast, a partnership woven into survival, mythology, and the rhythm of seasons. Scholars still debate whether such relationships were purely symbolic or tangible partnerships, but the evidence of attentiveness, feeding, and ritual care suggests both. Small mammals and birds were also cherished. Rabbits appear in folktales and daily life. Quails, turkeys, and songbirds were sometimes kept as pets or companions, their songs providing comfort and delight. You can almost hear the gentle trills of a bird near a child or the soft rustle of a rabbit nibbling on greens. Even in simple domestic life, humans cultivated patience, observation, and subtle joy. Across continents, animals were integrated into daily routines, spiritual practices, and ceremonies. Dogs guided travelers, birds carried omens, llamas and alpacas served both practical and celebratory roles, and jaguars or eagles symbolized cosmic forces. You drift along a riverbank where children play with small dogs, elders watch llamas grazing, and a hummingbird flits near a ceremonial offering. Each animal is both companion and teacher, participant and observer, weaving together human life and the natural world. A quirky yet charming detail emerges. Some communities would decorate guinea pigs for festivals, painting small patterns on their fur or tying tiny ribbons around them. You imagine the gentle hands of children creating colorful designs, the soft squeak of a guinea pig, the laughter of a family enjoying the ritual. Such moments reveal the tender, playful side of human-animal connection, even in societies with pressing survival needs. You wander into an Incan terrace at twilight. Alpacas shift lazily across the grassy slopes, their coats catching the last rays of sun. Dogs sit patiently beside shepherds, alert and calm. Birds roost in woven cages, and small animals curl in nooks near homes. Here, practicality and affection coexist seamlessly. Animals provide food, transportation, and companionship, yet their presence is also a source of quiet joy and observation. Scholars still debate the relative weight of function versus sentiment, but the small, tender acts, Brushing wool, feeding, observing speak louder than debate ever could. In ceremonial contexts, sacred animals bridge humans to divine realms. A jaguar might appear in ritual dance, its symbolism evoking power and mystery. Birds might accompany prayers, their flight carrying intention into the sky. Even dogs guide souls in the afterlife. You realize that animals in the Americas were never passive. They actively participated in human understanding of the cosmos and self, merging practicality, spirituality, and companionship into seamless life. As night falls across the Americas, stars blaze over highlands, forests, and rivers. You sense the quiet heartbeat of civilizations, human and animal intertwined. Dogs rest at feet of their companions, parrots settle in cages, llamas shift softly on grass, and jaguar cubs curl gently in ceremonial spaces. The world hums with a rhythm of shared life, quiet attention, and enduring companionship. In the fading light, you reflect on the universality of these bonds. Across cultures and continents, from Mesoamerica to the Andes, from the plains of North America to tropical forests, humans have cultivated patience, attentiveness, and care through interaction with animals. Each small act, stroking a dog, feeding a bird, observing a llama's movement, creates intimacy and understanding that transcends time. You take a deep breath, feeling the pulse of life surrounding you. The Americas' ancient companions, domestic, wild, sacred, or playful, embody timeless lessons, respect, attentiveness, and love for beings beyond yourself. These lessons echo softly, settling into your mind like the hush of night across the land. As the world quiets, the gentle presence of animals lingers. A dog's soft exhale, a bird's last chirp, a llama shifting on grass. You feel the rhythm of companionship, enduring and intimate. It is a bond that transcends survival, ceremony, or symbolism. Across centuries and continents, it whispers the same message. Care is timeless, presence is sacred, and shared life is always more beautiful.
You settle into your space now, the world quiet outside your window. Maybe a fan hums softly, or the gentle rustle of leaves drifts through the night air. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel your body relax, your shoulders easing, your mind softening, just as the civilizations you've wandered through let their animals rest after the day's rhythm. Picture a dog curling up beside a child, a cat stretching lazily on a sun-warmed wall, a bird perched quietly in its cage. Across centuries, across oceans and mountains, these small creatures remind us of the quiet magic of shared life. The pulse of companionship, subtle, patient, and enduring, flows through time, just as it flows through your breath, slow and steady. You may feel the warmth of imagined suns on Mesopotamian streets, the calm shimmer of koi ponds in China, the echo of castle laughter in medieval Europe, the opulent quiet of Ottoman gardens, or the soft winds over Andean terraces. Each place, each animal, each moment was alive with gentle attention, care, and the small joy of being present. Now, let your thoughts drift like a soft river. Imagine the gentle purring, cooing, and sighing of animals all around, lulling the edges of your mind into calm. You have walked with creatures of every continent, from the sacred to the ordinary, from the wild to the pampered. Let their quiet presence settle into your imagination, softening your thoughts and inviting ease. As your eyelids grow heavier, as the night deepens, remember, care, attention, and gentle companionship are timeless. Let the soft hum of shared life carry you into sleep. Whisper to yourself, tomorrow will bloom, and all life, big or small, will continue its tender rhythm. Good night. Sweet dreams.